Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the quiet, deliberate world of a samurai's tea. Master-be, 'cause nothing says relaxation like a warrior who could slice you in half, but chooses to whisk matcha instead. Picture this, it's 17th century Japan, and you're not some battle-scarred ronin or a scheming shogun. No, you're something far more unexpecteder, tea master. Your job, to turn boiling water and powdered leaves into a ritual so precise, so meditative, that even the most bloodthirsty warlords pause before raising a cup. Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Nothing like imagining someone drifting off to samurai tea tales at 3 a.m. in Oslo. So, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You weren't born into this. No, you started as just another sword-swinging, armor-clad samurai, trained to kill on command. But somewhere between your first battle and your 10th, you realized something unsettling. War is exhausting. Not just physically though, yes. Wearing 40 pounds of lacquered armor in Kyoto's summer humidity could melt a lesser man-butt mentally. The constant tension, the politics, the sheer noise of it all. And then, one day, your commander, a man who once beheaded 3 men before breakfast, invites you to a tea ceremony. You expect boredom, maybe a stuffy old man droning on about leaves. Instead, you find stillness. The way the tea master moves, like every gesture, is a prayer. The way the steam curls from the bowl. The way the first bitter sip clears your mind better than any sake ever could. Historians still argue whether tea masters were secretly the real power behind the throne. But one thing's clear. You're hooked. Here's the catch: you can't just decide to become a tea master. It's not like picking up archery or calligraphy. This is a path that demands years of study, a small fortune in equipment, and, most terrifying of all, patience. You, a man who once stabbed a rival for breathing too loudly at a banquet, must now learn to sit perfectly still for hours, mastering the art of pouring water without making a sound. And yet, you do it. Because in a world where one wrong word could mean death, the tea ceremony is the one place where silence is sacred, where even the most ruthless warlord must pause, breathe, and wait for the perfect moment to sip. Zen and the sword, two concepts that shouldn't mix. Yet here you are, a battle-hardened samurai, learning that the key to perfect swordsmanship might just lie in the ritual of tea. Your teacher, an elderly tea master with hands as steady as a drawn bowstring, doesn't care about your combat skills. In fact, the first time you try to rush through the steps, because surely it's just hot leaf water, he stops you with a single raised finger. Chinoyu is not about tea, he says. It is about control, and that's when it clicks. The way you hold the bamboo whisk matters as much as your grip on a katana. The angle at which you pour the water is as precise as a strike to an opponent's weak point. Even the way you kneel back straight, weight balance mirrors the stance. You'd take in a duel. Historians still argue whether tea ceremonies were originally designed as covert training for warriors. But one thing's undeniable: the greatest swordsmen of the era all studied tea. Here's the quirky bit: your teacher insists you practice in the most absurd conditions. A gusty courtyard where the wind threatens to topple your carefully arranged utensils. A cramped room so small you can't stretch your legs without kicking the brazier. Once, he even makes you prepare tea blindfolded, just to prove that true mastery relies on touch, not sight. You burn your fingers, twice. But the real test comes when a visiting daimyo, lord known for executing servants over lukewarm tea, arrives. Unannounced, your hands don't shake, your breathing stays even, and when you present the bowl, he doesn't praise the flavor. Instead, he nods and says, "Your movements were flawless." It's the highest compliment you've ever received. A day in the life your pre-dawn start as a tea master in Edo era, Japan. The cockerels are still asleep when you rise, sliding open the paper door to a world washed in indigo twilight. As a tea master, your day begins while the rest of the castle snores because perfection demands solitude. The first task, preparing the charcoal, not just any charcoal, mind you, but high quality ubamoke, carefully selected for its clean burn and lack of crackling. One rogue spark could ruin the entire ceremonies, meditative atmosphere, and then where would you be? Explaining to a grumpy daimyo why his morning tea comes with the scent of singed tea, ATAMI. Your hands move through the familiar routine, arranging the iron kettle just so, measuring the day's first portion of matcha with a bamboo scoop that's seen better days but has the perfect patina, and most crucially checking the water. Not with a thermometer, of course, but by listening. There's a particular sound water makes just before boiling, a quiet gathering of bubbles that old tea masters call the wind in the pines. Miss that moment, and the water becomes too harsh for the delicate tea. Catch it perfectly, and even the most hardened samurai will pause mid-sip, sensing something extraordinary in their cup. Historians still argue whether the famed tea master Senno Rikia actually slept, given how much lore surrounds his pre-dawn rituals. What we do know is that by the time the castle's servants are stirring, you've already performed 3 silent tea preparations just for practice, composed a seasonal flower arrangement using branches from the garden, secretly taste-tested the days, sweet strictly for quality assurance, the quirky detail, that wooden ladle you use to transfer water. It's carved from a single piece of bamboo, aged for exactly 7 years, and according to legend will crack audibly if the water isn't at the perfect temperature. Yours has never cracked. Yet, the tools of tranquility, the bizarre and expensive gadgets in your tea kitchen, kneel beside your prized lacquered box, its contents more carefully curated than a shogun's armory. Forget swords, your true weapons are here. A bamboo whisk, with exactly 100 tines, no more, no less. A ceramic tea caddy, small enough to hide in your palm, and a silk cloth folded with geometric precision. Each piece has a name, a history, and a price that could feed a peasant family for a year. Take your chashaku, the slender bamboo scoop. It looks simple, but its curve was perfected over generations to measure exactly 1.8 grams of matcha, ideal amount for one serving. Too little, and the tea lacks body. Too much, and your guest spends the next hour vibrating like a plucked bowstring. There's even a famous, if apocryphal, tale about a tea master who committed seppuku after serving a warlord an overly caffeinated bowl. Historians still argue whether the incident actually occurred, but every apprentice handles their chashaku with extra reverence afterward. Then there's the comma, your iron kettle. Not just any hunk of metal. This one was forged by a blind smith in Kyoto who claimed to listen to the iron's purity as he worked. Its uneven surface, far from a flaw, creates a unique bubbling rhythm that sounds, improbably, like distant temple bells. You've rejected 3 perfect kettles because their tones were too shrill or lacked character. The quirkiest item, the fukusa, the silk cloth used to purify utensils. Yours is dyed with persimmon tannin, a process that takes 6 months, and stains the fabric an unremarkable brown, until sunlight hits it just right, revealing hidden patterns of cranes in flight. Of course, no one but you ever notices this, but that's not the point. The point is that even the most mundane task, wiping a spoon, becomes an act of hidden beauty. Water whisperers, how you sourced the perfect water for warlords. You don't just fetch water, you court it, like a shy lover. Before dawn, you slip through the castle gates with empty gourds strapped to your back, heading for a specific bend in the river where the current slows just enough to let impurities settle. The ideal water, according to centuries of tea masters, must be neither too forward nor too reticent, whatever that means. You know it when you taste it. A certain softness on the tongue, a lack of metallic bite, a whisper of mountain minerals. Today's water comes from the moon viewing spring, a tiny fissure in the rocks 3 miles northeast of the castle. Legend says a 12th century poet discovered it when his spilled teacup refilled itself overnight with miraculously sweet water. The local monks now guard it zealously, convinced its purity comes from lying directly under a Buddha statue's gaze. You're fairly certain that's nonsense, but you still leave an offering of salt each visit, just in case. The real challenge: transport. Water changes character if jostled too much, so you walk at a meditative pace, avoiding uneven ground. Once, a bandit ambushed you on the trail, saw your gourds, and instead of robbing you demanded to know your water source. Even outlaws appreciate good tea. Historians still argue whether the famed 7 wells of Edo actually produced superior water, or if their reputation came from clever marketing by tea merchants. The quirky bit: your secret weapon, a piece of driftwood shaped like a sleeping fox. Drop it in questionable water, and if it floats at a perfect 45-degree angle, the water's usable. Does it actually work? Unclear, but you haven't poisoned a warlord yet. The politics of a sip tea, a silent diplomacy between rival clans. The tea room becomes a battlefield when Lord Kuroda's delegation arrives, except instead of swords, everyone's armed with polite compliments and lethal subtleties. You've prepared for this moment like a general preparing for siege warfare. The tea selection: a rare Yuji blend gifted coincidentally, of course, by Lord Kuroda's own nephew last autumn. The sweets, shaped like cranes, a nod to the Kuroda family. Crest: every detail whispers I respect you, while silently negotiating an alliance that could prevent months of bloodshed. As you kneel to prepare the first bowl, you notice Lord Kuroda's advisor, a wiry man with a permanent squint, watching your hands like a hawk. He's counting your whisk strokes. Tradition dictates exactly 20 rotations to froth the tea, but you deliberately stop at 18. A tiny rebellion, signaling that while you honor custom, you're not bound by it. The advisor's eyebrow twitches. Message received. Historians still argue whether the famous Night of the Silent Teas actually prevented a war, or if the opposing lords had already decided to make peace. What's undeniable is that when diplomacy happened over tea, the terms always lasted longer than those negotiated in grand halls. Something about sharing bitter flavors made compromises easier to swallow. The quirky detail: that unassuming bamboo ladle resting by your knee. It's hollow, and if blown into at a specific angle, produces a tone matching the Kuroda family's battle horn. Purely decorative, of course, unless, say, assassins burst in and you need to alert the guards without breaking ceremony decorum. Not that you've ever tested this. Probably. Fashionably late. Why being late to a tea ceremony could get you killed. You check the water temperature for the 3rd time, fingers hovering just above the kettle's rim. the guest of honor Lord Shimazu, a man who once executed a servant for serving slightly asymmetrical rice, was supposed to arrive at the hour of the snake. It's now halfway through the hour of the horse. Every extra minute stretches your nerves tighter than a bowstring. Being late to a tea ceremony isn't just rude, it's a potential death sentence. In 1587, a daimyo famously ordered a tea master's hands cut off for starting without him. The tea master had waited a disrespectful 2 hours. The gardens. Evening cicadas have started their shrill chorus when you finally hear footsteps. But it's not Lord Shimazu, just his nervous page boy, whispering that his lord stopped to admire the evening moon. Code for "I'm making you sweat on purpose." You nod serenely while mentally calculating how to adjust the ceremony. The water must be discarded and reheated. The sweets replaced, the first batch's edges have crisped in the humid air, and the charcoal rearranged to burn slower, all without appearing rushed. Historians still argue whether famous tea masters like Senno Rikia kept secret backup supplies for these situations. The quirky truth: you've hidden an identical set of pre-prepared utensils behind a sliding panel. The matcha in your main caddy is now too clumpy from waiting, but the emergency stash, stored with a few grains of rice to absorb moisture, remains perfect. A trick you learned from a retired courtesan who moonlighted as a tea smuggler. When Lord Shimazu finally saunters in, you're kneeling exactly where you were hours ago, the room's atmosphere as undisturbed as a frozen pond. He sniffs the steam rising from his freshly whisked tea and remarks, "How fortunate the moon was so captivating tonight." You smile like you don't know this was a test. Like you haven't just rewritten tea ceremony rules to accommodate his ego. Like your backup tea isn't technically a felony under the shogun's luxury goods laws. The forbidden sweet. The scandalous history of sugar in Samurai 2 unwrapped the contraband with the care of a smuggler handling gunpowder. Single cube of Nanbon 2, southern barbarian sugar, smuggled in by Portuguese traders. In this bitter world of matcha, sugar is more than a luxury. It's borderline heresy. Traditionalists claim it corrupts the tea's purity, but you've seen hardened warriors weep after their first taste of sweetened matcha. The shogunate has banned it twice, which only makes warlords crave it more. Tonight's experiment: a single grain dissolved in the rinsing water, just enough to create a phantom sweetness that lingers on the tongue. You serve it to young Lord Date, whose father famously executed 3 merchants for selling sugar-coated tea cakes. The moment the bowl touches his lips, his eyebrows shoot up. This tea, it tastes like, he can't bring himself to say childhood. But you see the memory flash across his face of stolen sweets, of simpler times before he inherited a domain and its 1,000 problems. Historians still argue whether the 1638 sugar purge was really about culinary tradition or just the shogunate's excuse to seize Portuguese trade ships. The quirky truth: many tea masters kept secret sugar stashes in false-bottomed tea caddies. Some even hollowed out bamboo whisks to hide tiny portions. Your own emergency supply is tucked inside a seemingly solid iron kettle. The craftsmanship, so precise even a customs inspector wouldn't detect the hidden compartment. As Lord Date drains his bowl, he murmurs, "My father would have killed you for this." Then, horrifyingly, he smiles. "Make it again." Ghosts in the tea house. Superstitions and spirits haunting your workspace. The old tea house creaks differently at night. Not the usual settling of wood, but something closer to a sigh. You pretend not to hear it as you arrange the mornings. Utensils, though your fingers linger a second longer than necessary on the Natsumon tea caddy. This particular container, lacquered a deep crimson, was a gift from a deceased mentor. Rumor claims it sometimes opens itself at midnight, releasing the scent of long evaporated tea. You've never witnessed this phenomenon personally, but you also don't stay past dusk. Samurai may scoff at ghost stories, but tea masters know better. Every major tea house has its resident spirit. The weeping woman who haunts the well at Kenroku-in. The child's handprints that appear in the steam at Kadeji. Yours is comparatively polite. Former tea master who lingers near the alcove. His presence announced by the sudden chill when you misplace a tool. Last winter, when you forgot to rotate the charcoal properly, every shoshi screen in the room slid shut simultaneously. Message received. Historians still argue whether these ghosts were actual supernatural occurrences or just clever psychological manipulation by tea masters to enforce discipline. The quirky proof: many tea houses kept spirit utensils, a cracked bowl deliberately left in storage, or a warped bamboo whisk hung in plain view as reminders of past mistakes. Yours is a slightly chipped chowan that inexplicably keeps finding its way back to the shelf, no matter how often you try to discard it. Tonight, as you light the evening's last candle, the flame gutters for no discernible reason. You place an extra portion of tea in the alcove, just in case. Some traditions are worth maintaining, alive or otherwise. Tea or treason. How tea masters secretly passed messages for rebels. The scroll in your sleeve weighs nothing, yet might as well be a boulder. It arrived at dawn, slipped inside a seemingly innocent shipment of Yuji Machujes, another tea master receiving supplies from his supplier, but you felt the difference immediately. The tea caddy's lid was a fraction too tight, the bamboo wrapper folded with an extra crease. Now, as you prepare tea for Lord Hosokawa's chief retainer, the tiny scrap of paper burns against your wrist like a brand. You select your most unremarkable tea bolt, glazed a forgettable brown because the best hiding place is in plain sight. The ceremony proceeds normally. Boiling water, measured whisk strokes, the quiet clink of porcelain on tatami. Only when serving do you tilt the bowl slightly, revealing 3 barely visible scratches near the base. To anyone else, there are flaws in the glaze. To the retainer, they're coordinates for a secret meeting. Historians still argue whether the famous teacup conspiracy of 1614 actually involved coded messages or was merely political paranoia. The quirky truth: many tea utensils were designed for espionage. Some tea scoops contained hollow shafts for hiding documents. Certain kettles had lids that, when rotated, revealed minute etchings. Your personal favorite is the laughing whisker, bamboo tool that makes an unusual sound when used, signaling that the tea house is under surveillance. As the retainer drinks, his little finger taps twice against the bowl's rim. Message received. You exhale through your nose, not quite a sigh, but close. Tomorrow, someone will gift you a new tea caddy. The cycle begins again. The art of imperfection, why your flawed tea bowl was worth a casillion. Cradle the chowan like a wounded bird, its uneven rim, the faint crack running through its glaze, the way it sits slightly crooked when placed on the tatami. To the untrained eye, it's a reject. To a tea master, it's the pinnacle of wabi-sabi, beauty in imperfection. This particular bowl, nicknamed Moon's Shadow, was fired during a thunderstorm in 1578. The kill's temperature fluctuated wildly, creating accidental swirls in the glaze that looked like clouds parting. Rumor says Toyotomi Hideyoshi once offered 3 castles for it. The owner refused. Now it's yours. and you treat it with the reverence of a sacred relic. When preparing tea, you always rotate it so the crack faces you a silent apology for the flaw you're about to exploit. Because here's the secret. That defect changes how the tea cools. The uneven thickness creates microcurrents in the liquid, giving each sip a subtly different temperature and texture. Purists claim they can taste which side of the bowl the tea was poured from. Historians still argue whether famous tea masters deliberately damaged their own wares to achieve these effects. The quirky proof: many flawed bowls show signs of being carefully rebroken after initial repairs. Your own teacher confessed to dropping a perfect Korean teacup down stone steps, then spending years trying to recreate that perfectly imperfect break. As you serve tea tonight, your guest, a young samurai obsessed with perfection. When he sees the bowl, it's damaged, he whispers. You smile and say what your teacher once told you: no, it's complete. Meditation or nap? The fine line between Zen focus and dozing off mid-ceremony. Charcoal's glow dims to embers as the hour stretches past midnight. Your guest, a visiting monk renowned for his discipline, hasn't moved in 43 minutes. His breathing is deep, his posture perfect, his hands folded just so on his lap. There's just one problem: he's definitely asleep. The subtle droop of his shoulders, the way his nostrils flare slightly with each exhale. You've seen this before. The poor man has succumbed to what tea masters discreetly call chinoyu namiri, tea ceremony sleep. You face a dilemma. Do you A. let him sleep, risking his humiliation upon waking, B. accidentally clink a utensil, the traditional wake-up call, C. serve the next round, extra strong chemical warfare via caffeine? You opt for option D, stealthily adjusting the room's airflow. A slight tilt of the brazier's lid sends a thin stream of smoke toward the monk. His nose twitches. Then, glorious victory, he snaps awake with a nearly imperceptible jerk, immediately resuming his meditative expression as if nothing happened. The ceremony continues without comment. Historians still argue whether certain tea ceremonies were designed to induce sleep as a form of meditation. The quirky evidence: many Edo period tea manuals include instructions for sleep-resistant seating arrangements and recipes for alertness-enhancing teas served exclusively to drowsy guests. Your personal trick: keeping a stash of Carragane roasted tea stems in your sleeve. It brews a subtly more caffeinated version of matcha when emergency wakefulness is required. As you whisk the next bowl, you notice your own eyelids growing heavy. Maybe you'll use some of that Carragane for yourself. The tea master's diet: what you ate and didn't eat to stay sharp your morning meal, is a study in restraint. One pickled plum, a square of grilled tofu no larger than a domino, and a cup of hot water with a single pine needle steeping in it. Not because you enjoy suffering, though some tea masters certainly act like they do, but because a full stomach dulls the senses. You need to detect the difference between water boiled at 80 degrees Celsius versus 85 degrees Celsius, to smell the faintest mustiness in aging tea leaves, to notice when a guest's perfume might clash with the matcha's aroma. The real challenge comes during multi-day ceremonies, when you must sustain yourself without ruining your palate. Your secret: katsuobushi shavings, paper thin, flakes of dried bonito, kept hidden in a compartment of your tea chest. They dissolve instantly on the tongue, delivering a burst of umami that staves off hunger without lingering. Historians still argue whether tea masters developed this trick or stole it from ninja, who used similar rations during long stakeouts. The quirkiest part of your diet: what you avoid. No garlic for 3 days before important ceremonies. it dulls. Taste buds. No alcohol, obviously. And absolutely no konnyaku. The gelatinous yam cake sticks to the palate like a determined barnacle. Once, a well-meaning servant served it to you before a ceremony with the shogun's tea master. You spent the entire event discreetly scraping your tongue against your teeth, certain you'd ruined the subtleties of a prized tenri tea tonight. As you prepare for tomorrow's ceremony, you catch a kitchen maid about to add ginger to your rice. You freeze her with a look. She pales, realizing her mistake. Some battles are fought with teacups, others with side dishes. Retirement, a myth. Why retired tea masters were really just spies. The scroll arrives disguised as a tea merchant's invoice, routine stock lists on the surface. But when you hold it over steam, hidden characters appear between the lines. Moon viewing pavilion. Hour of the boar. Bring the cloud kettle. You sigh and start packing. So much for your peaceful retirement in the countryside, where you were supposedly just a harmless old man growing tea bushes and occasionally lecturing neighborhood children on proper whisking techniques. In truth, RETI, masters are the shogunate's most valuable intelligence assets. Who better to move between rival domains unnoticed than a frail-looking tea enthusiast? Your garden tours conveniently pass by castle walls. Your memory lapses provide perfect excuses to ask repetitive questions. And that ceremonial visit to Lord Date's estate last month. Let's just say the layout of his fortifications now resides in a coded tea diary, disguised as tasting notes. Winter harvest unexpectedly robust, with defensive overtones in the mid-palate ... Historians still argue whether Senno Rikiya's famous retirement was actually cover for his secret diplomacy. The quirky proof. Many so-called retired masters kept shockingly detailed travel records. Your own mentor accidentally left behind at caddy at every major castle in western Japan, each one containing a unique clay blend that, when analyzed, revealed the local water composition. Military strategists paid handsomely for such information as you fold your traveling cloak. Your grandniece, actually a junior intelligence operative, bursts in with news. The cloud kettle's special compartment needs resealing. You nod already, mentally composing the report you'll hide inside. Some skills, like good tea, only improve with age. Legacy in a teaspoon. How your work outlived the samurai era. The steam rises in slow curls as you prepare what might be your final bowl knot. Because you're dying, though, at 83. That's always a possibility. But because the world outside your tea room no longer makes sense, they say the emperor has returned to power. That samurai are cutting off their top knots. That someone in Tokyo invented a machine to mass-produce tea. You focus on the familiar ritual. Warming the bowl. Measuring the vibrant green powder. Waiting for that perfect moment when the water whispers it's ready. A young man in Western clothing kneels across from you, your great-grandson, who studies economics at a newfangled university. He watches with polite curiosity as you whisk the tea into froth. You know he'll never master this art, not truly. But when you hand him the bowl, he cradles it, correctly left palm beneath, right fingers. Steadying the remand, something in his posture reminds you of your younger self. The way he sniffs the aroma before sipping. That's instinct no school can teach. Historians still argue whether tea ceremonies survived because of tradition, or because it filled some universal human need for stillness. The quirky proof. When Japan rushed headlong into modernization, it was businessmen, not priests or scholars, who kept the tradition alive, using tea rooms as neutral spaces to negotiate deals. Your old spy contacts now run corporations, and they still send coded messages through tea selections. Send the autumn harvest blend means stock prices are falling. As your great-grandson drains the bowl, he does something unexpected. He asks to try whisking himself. You guide his clumsy hands, just as your teacher once guided yours. The motion is all wrong, the tea lumpy and bitter. Its perfect 300-word wind-downth. Last embers fade in the brazier as night settles around the tea room, like a well-worn robe. Outside, the modern world hums, cars rattle past. A radio plays distant jazz. Electric lights glow where lanterns once flickered. But in here, time moves differently. The scent of tatami and aged tea wood lingers in the air, familiar as your own breath. You used to worry whether any of it mattered all. Those years of perfecting water temperatures, memorizing secret codes in tea foam, walking knife-edge politics disguised as hospitality. Now you understand, the ceremony was never about tea. It was about the space between actions, the pause before pouring, the silence after a sip, the way even the most powerful warlord had to sit still for those few precious moments, if only to avoid burning his tongue. Your hands, once steady enough to whisk tea during an earthquake, now tremble slightly as you put away the utensils. The bowl goes here, the scoop rests there. Each movement carries decades of muscle memory. Somewhere in Tokyo, your great-grandson is probably drinking coffee from a tin cup, rushing to some meeting. But you know with the quiet certainty of someone who has survived revolutions that someday, when the world becomes too loud, he'll remember this afternoon. The weight of a teacup, the patience required to wait for perfect water, the candle, gutters